Really appreciate you all having us here today. I have with me today Amy White, who's our grant writer for Boys and Girls Clubs in Tennessee, and then Bart McFadden, who's the president and CEO of Boys and Girls Clubs of Tennessee Valley, which is one of our larger local organizations that make up the part of Boys and Girls Clubs in Tennessee. So just real quick before we kind of get into the program, we thought it might be helpful to talk a little bit about Boys and Girls Clubs in Tennessee. Boys and Girls Clubs in Tennessee is a statewide umbrella, so we serve kids from Bristol to Memphis. So we're located in rural, urban, suburban communities and try to meet the needs of those families in all of those communities. We were fortunate when the pandemic happened. This state's economy was shut down. We were fortunate to partner with the state of Tennessee, specifically the Tennessee Department of Human Services, to provide emergency child care for essential workers. I think that shows the great flexibility in our organization to pivot within our mission to meet the local needs. In that 72-week program, we ran through $26 million in partnership with the state to help drive locally and meet the needs of those communities, and served over 8,300 kids on that program. So again, we're here today going to talk about the Open Doors program to help us continue to work and meet the needs of the families we serve. So our vision and values proposition. So our vision, Boys and Girls Clubs in Tennessee will operate a comprehensive program that builds skills, provides opportunities, supports TANF-eligible families to achieve academic success and pursue meaningful careers and live healthy and fulfilling lives. And our value proposition too, and I'm not going to read that for you, but really what is the most important element is we're serving families, again, in rural, urban, suburban communities in East, Middle, and West Tennessee. And each of our club sites are uniquely qualified and are uniquely different based on the strengths and the weaknesses of each of those communities. So how did we come up with this plan? I'd love to say this is Ryan Hughes' plan or Boys and Girls Clubs in Tennessee's plan. This is TANF-eligible families' plan. So through our process, 3-month planning process, we had a bottom-up strategy where we went directly to the families that we already serve today. Historically, 70% of the families we serve are TANF-eligible. Right now, that's 77%. But we went out, broadened even further in that community and brought in families. And we got direct feedback. So we got that direct feedback through online and handouts, through surveys, over 4,000 surveys, 4,056. Of those, it was evenly divided between youth and the parents, the caregivers. Also, 410 from different stakeholders. So that's everything from private businesses to other nonprofits in those communities that we serve, and got feedback directly from them on what the barriers that they were facing on a day-to-day basis. Also, we had face-to-face small group focus groups. And so we, another 422 youth, 470 parents and caregivers, and 484 stakeholders face-to-face. So some parents, they were more comfortable because they have a relationship with our existing staff, our frontline staff, so it was a one-on-one. Some of those were small group sittings, some similar to like we're here where we got 15 or 20 people around a table. And then our local planning process all the way through, we had 128 localized meetings of just our internal staff of bringing in community partners around building this strategy.
So through that extensive process, and I got it right, Dakota. Through that extensive process, face-to-face contact, like Ryan said, with TANF-eligible children and families, we identified multiple barriers, and you can see them here. Affordable child care was listed as the consistent #1 barrier for families that we serve. And that's something that Boys and Girls Clubs in Tennessee meet head on. Clubs are on average open 245 days a year, providing school-age child care on the days when parents need us most, days when kids are out of school, summer break, spring break, fall break, those times when parents need us most. And that's what we heard from employers too. Hey, we have to shut down lines in this industrial park when school's out for a day, election day, or a snow day, or something like that, because parents have nowhere for their kids to go. That's the #1 need that was identified. Mental health support. I think we're all keenly aware of how prominent that need is for TANF-eligible families that suffer trauma and distress. Workforce development and financial literacy. Yes, we want to get families to work. We're helping kids scale that barrier with our high school programs and things like that. We're also working with families to connect them with those business partners that we have for job opportunities, but also preparing our kids, but also their families with appropriate financial literacy and education so they know how to manage those dollars when they earn them in a meaningful job. And then something we've heard about consistently throughout this process, coordination of services across the systems. It's very hard to get from service provider A to service provider B. How do I get there? What's the warm handoff that we keep hearing about? And then last but not least, because like Ryan said, we're serving suburban, rural, and urban communities across the 3 grand divisions of the state, there are some very unique challenges to specific communities. You know, if you look at it, things are going to be different from Tazewell to Memphis. Services need to be different from Greenville to Chattanooga. So those are the things that we're working on. In Knox County specifically, we see an access to technology issue. So working to provide technological education, but also the resources to take that technology home, and then outreach to specific populations, ethnic groups, and things like that vary from community to community across the state.
So looking at the population to be served, so TANF eligible youth ages 5 to 13, the affordable child care component can be met. TANF eligible youth 13 and up, in really even beyond what we typically serve in that workforce development component. And then TANF eligible youth to be served annually, and additionally is 25,000. 5 through recruitment. That'll be recruitment not only within the existing communities we are, but through community partners referring back as we refer them out, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. And TANF eligible families with those wraparound support services so that we can help them ultimately get off of the government assistance at the end of the day. It would be 8,000.
So for us, what is the innovation that we're bringing to the table in this process? Let me first say that our innovation is not necessarily around creation. Our innovation is around connection and making sure that our families are connected to the services they need. I think if you look at this, Boys and Girls Club programs are aligned fully to the purposes of TANF, but also the universal outcomes of this project. Our clubs are going to really be able to leverage the trust. Like Ryan said, 20,000 families that we have existing, 20,000 children, 8,000 families. These are families and children that we see every single day, okay? We know that engagement with families is so important. So many institutions that work with kids struggle with family engagement. Let me tell you, the Boys and Girls Club does not. Because those parents, every day they come in and they pick their child up from a club. They have a conversation with that club staff. There's that time when Johnny's got to run and get his book bag and do this. That 2 or 3 minutes of informal interaction every day develops a relationship, and you know what's going on in the homes of those families. They share that. We understand what their needs are, and we can build that trust and leverage that to take them to partners that they need to meet their needs. I think this is the other thing. This is a family-led approach. You know, we talked about the surveys than we did, but it's also a community-by-community approach. Like I said, the needs are going to be different from our rural communities to our urban communities, our suburban communities. Each club is located in the community, and they understand the specific needs of that community and the families within it, and they can activate resources to meet those specific needs. This model, we really feel, is going to be equally effective in those rural communities as it is in the urban communities. We're going to be able to utilize our existing infrastructure. Ryan kind of gave you a little bit of an overview of how our organization statewide is set up. But we've got 18 clubs across 29 counties, and if you look at the handout that you've received there, you'll see the 29 counties where we have clubs across the state of Tennessee.
On the back
and
side.
Each of those individual organizations have strong infrastructures and experience in managing these types of funding sources historically. The most important piece of this, I believe, for us, though, is what we call our community navigator. Our community navigator is somebody that's going to be working in each community to connect the dots. We've got our frontline staff that have those deep relationships like I just described with parents. They're going to work with that community navigator to say, hey, we've got this family, here's their needs. Let's help them, walk alongside them to connect them to those resources, to love them, to hold them accountable in a loving way, and make sure that they're making progress through the process. Again, these are people that will be relevant in the communities they're in. Our community navigators are going to know the resources available in those communities and how to connect people to that And with the trust that's already there, that's been established through the daily interaction with those families, we'll be able to make those connections for our families. So if you look forward, alignment to TANF goals, this funding asks that these proposals align with at least one. Boys and Girls Club programming aligns with all four. And there's a historical relevance to that. Clubs across the country have always been able to leverage TANF resources. We've been able to leverage it here in Tennessee historically because of our tight alignment to improving the lives and well-being of families. In the same vein, the universal outcomes, we really hit head on each of these universal outcomes that we desire to see through this TANF planning grant process.
And so, talking about our collaborative process and who we really brought to the table, in addition to our families, once we heard from them, that really drove the direction of who needs to have a seat at the table, in addition to the family themselves, but also through community partners. So you can see that it really hits and drives back to what our families told us, that the supports that they need. It all exists. We're not having to create anything. But again, back to that community navigator, in many cases, inside of government or inside certain organizations, it's very program specific. And we're taking down all of those barriers. And sometimes it's, only we can work with you for a few months. No, we're going to get you to the end of the process. And so through this process, we learned about things in our communities that existed in the private sector and in the nonprofit and the faith-based community that we didn't even know existed. And we're living next door to them in many cases, whether that's in East, Middle, and West Tennessee. So that process has just been wonderful. In all, I also would be remiss to not say we also view, even though they're a part of our statewide organization, our 18 local organizations that make up over 100 local club sites is also a vital partner in all of this as a trusted relationship of these families we serve. But I want to call out a couple. Appalachian Opportunity Fund, they're going to partner with us statewide. Financial literacy came up time and time again. Financial literacy coaches, not only for the families themselves, but also training our frontline staff. As Bart talked about, that's where the relationship is. That's invaluable. And those trusted individuals are going to be armed to be able to have those sometimes tough conversations. But in addition to that, they'll have some small group training as well. Workforce development. Goodwill's Industries has a great, and they're a partner signed on with us. They have a great online platform. What Bart talked about is not unique to Knoxville, all across the state. And quite frankly, a lot of government things in a good way have kind of shifted to be an all one-stop shop, but you also got to have access to the internet. And so we're going to utilize our facilities to open up during the day when kids are not there so that families can come in, access our workforce development online platform. But in addition to that, it's also about the youth that we're serving. We're preparing them so hopefully they never have to be a TANF eligible individual later on in life, like potentially their parent or caregiver is. Mental health support, we have 6 of those. Those are regionally based. Multiple club sites come up underneath that. And then higher education. I pointed this out as an example on higher education. We have a lot of those that have stepped up from TCATs to 2-year universities to 4-year universities. But that's where, again, the community navigator role really steps in and has helped to weed through all of that. So next slide. So anticipated outcomes, you can see that these are really high expectations. But quite frankly, in Boys and Girls Clubs, we hold ourselves to that higher, and quite frankly, the families deserve for us to hold ourselves to that higher standard. That is based on years of working in federal and statewide public funding grants and other funding sources where we've been able to hit those out of the park. An example I'll point out to you all, in the middle of the pandemic, we pivoted, and for 1,400 kids across the state, we did high-dosage tutoring. We were able to move kids from the 29th percentile to 39th percentile in math over a 7-week period. That was something we stepped outside the box, much in the same way that we're going to be able to do here. Budget.
Looking at the budget here, $25 million. For us, it's really going to be relatively equally spread over the 3-year period. You can see that these budgets reflect about 44 to 47% range for salaries. These are new positions, mainly the community navigators that will be in clubs across the state, but also a portion of some existing positions that are so pivotal to building and maintaining those relationships like I talked about. These budgets were developed at each local organization to kind of capture the needs of those specific communities and then funnel up into the overall plan for the organization as a whole. We're providing approximately 20% of this funding in direct specific assistance to individuals. And across the state, this is something to really important to know. We're going to be leveraging $29 million of existing private investment in Boys and Girls Clubs across the state. Okay? So that's the opportunity for us to partner this money with those existing private investments to scale this program to even more communities. When we look at sustainability, Boys and Girls Clubs is the 7th most recognized and trusted nonprofit brand nationally. And in the state of Tennessee, we have similar regard from state departments and from private investors, as you can see. And like I said, results receive investment. And we truly feel that if we achieve those short-term outcomes that we talked about a little bit earlier, private investment is going to continue to grow. You see a quote here from Dave Miller, our friend who is the TQE board member, First Horizon president, talks about the readiness and willingness of the private sector to step in and continue funding what proven results are generated from this process.
Thank you all.
Just on the one of the singular innovations is the navigators. How many navigators are you anticipating, and are all these new employees?
Yeah, so the navigator position would be all new employees. It's a network of existing employees on frontline staff being able to help hand those parents off. They're the trusted adult that's already, they, quite frankly, many of them grew up in that same community, know those individuals, and so those are going to be the ones that are going to be handing off to that community navigator.
But how many per, is it per club?
So we're based, so this pilot would be based in 29 counties across the state, and so, each budget was a little bit different, but there's at least one in every single county. It depended on case, kind of a caseload type scenario. So there's some counties like Knox, for example, which is, there's a lot more folks there, or in Hamilton County, Shelby County, where there were more than one.
Do you have a ratio in mind, like how many families per navigator or that kind of thing?
I think, so a little bit of that is going to determine on the caseload itself. So, in some cases, that's a great question. In some cases, it's going to be a one handoff. In other cases, that may be a long process that takes a lot of time. So we have the flexibility to make adjustments, not only within this budget, but also outside of that through private investment. We did that good.
On the slide you had about the specific local needs, the community-specific needs.
Yes, ma'am.
I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about kind of what those might be, how those are determined, and then what that would look like specific to this grant.
Yeah, so, back to the community navigators, let me say this into your question. We see this as a natural focus group for the department, these community navigators. Through our organization, one point of contact, we'll be able to pick up trends on those community-specific trends, because as we all know, certain things happen in Appalachia and Northeast Tennessee that may not be impacting, Shelby County and West Tennessee, or so things may be happening in rural West Tennessee. So those community-specific needs, that's that flexibility to really meet what those needs are. Bart, do you want to give a couple of specific examples of what you heard locally?
For instance, for us in Knox County, access to technology is a significant issue for families, especially when you look at so many services being online to access them now. So, we developed a partnership with Enox, which is a provider that does technology education. So they'll come into our clubs and do technology education with 10 families at a time. And then when they complete the course, they'll have access to low-cost or free internet in their home for at least 12 months. In addition to, they'll have a free device that they're able to take with them at the conclusion of the course.
Another example is in urban areas, public transportation is not always a barrier, but when you get to rural Tennessee, it specifically is. So having conversations through this, we had conversations with employers to talk about, is there a way that they can step up and provide that service, or is there another nonprofit that provides it that our families that we talked to just didn't even know existed? And there was some of that as well.
What will be different in the communities that are served? What will be different from this model than the existing order?
Yeah, so I think the existing order is our bread and butter, obviously, is economically disadvantaged youth, ages 5 to 18. But this allows us to make that impact even broader. I mean, there's some of this informally happening now. There's handoff to community partners to help parents, but not in a uniform, specific, strategic way where you can really look at trends, share best practices, and say, is this really working? Is this the best way to do this? This allows us to do it within the existing infrastructure in most places that already exist, and it's connecting those dots. And I was fortunate to listen to a couple. I think that's an existing theme that we're hearing across the state. That we're blessed in this state to have a lot of great opportunities, but not equitably for every individual. This allows for that.
I'll go a step further, Commissioner. I think, like Ryan said, we serve kids and we have those kids, but traditionally, the impact on whole families has not been as robust as we would like for it to be because our focus is on the kids. So engaging through the community navigators, we're going to be able to reach whole families, but also, reach new kids through the engagement of the partners. This may be becoming a two-way street where they're sending families to us as well, which is something that probably isn't happening to the level it needs to right now. Raise them high.
Are you going to help in all the counties, like even the little bitty counties that you have, not just the big counties? I know where I live is a very small county. If it wasn't for the Boys and Girls Club, there would be kids that wouldn't eat, that wouldn't have a lot of stuff because school in the Boys and Girls Club is what keeps them. They send food home on Fridays, so they'll have food on the weekends. And parents wouldn't be able to work because they wouldn't be able to afford childcare.
To answer your question, yes, ma'am. And obviously, we hope that we land one of these pilots, and it'll be in the 29 counties that we have as a part of this. But our statewide umbrella extends even further than that. And then, outside of even this, our organization is trying to meet the needs in every single one of the communities we serve. And to your point, yes, that's in small towns all the way up to large urban centers. We actually have more rural clubs in this state than we do located in our urban centers. So sometimes we people think of Boys and Girls Clubs and thinks of metro, areas of the state. We definitely serve kids there as well. But in Tennessee, we're a rural state, and we have the majority of ours in rural communities.
I will say this. I know there's several organizations in our state right now that are looking at expansion. Our organization is one. We just expanded into a rural community up in Claiborne County. And we've got other organizations that are looking to expand into Polk and other small rural communities in this state because there is unmet need. You look in your large urban centers, there are an abundance of resources, but you look in a community like that, we may be the only game in town in meeting the needs of literally everything.
Well, in that expansion too, let me just take it a step further. Our clubs are traditionally that 5 to 18. We have organizations that are already doing this and some that are looking to go below 5 and to go beyond 18. Because kind of we talk about the cliff of Tanf eligible, just people dropping off of it. We see that with some of our youth that need an extra hand just a little bit longer, or quite frankly, by the time we get them, those social determinants of health are so stacked against them that we're trying to play catch up from day one.
I have two questions now to piggyback on Rachel. Are you in all 95 counties? And maybe I missed it.
No, we're not. But in this pilot, we're doing 29. I think of the 33 current counties that we're in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my next it's in the handout that it's under my notes. Okay. And then my next question is: you mentioned earlier that there were companies that had to shut down a manufacturing line because they don't have child care, or their employees don't have child care, so they have to shut down that line. Can you share, and you don't have to do it right now, we can do it afterwards, with me what companies those are, or who you're hearing that from and where you're hearing it from? Because I'd very much like to know that. Yeah. Plus, sit on a task force with DHS talking about child care, so I think that would be very beneficial.
Yeah, and yes, happy to do that. And I'll say this, happy to do that,
Okay.
for sure, yeah. And just to the workforce component, I think where you're maybe going with that too is we look at workforce, again, not only empowering the young people so that they're more prepared for the workforce, so that they're not TANF eligible, but also it's a safe place for kids to go so that that TANF eligible individual doesn't have to worry about where their kids are so they can go and seek that employment when we do that handoff to the local employer or the other community partner.
Okay. So now that I see this list, thank you, Jerry. I'm curious to know why you chose the counties you chose. Is it based on your footprint, your existing footprint? Because I mean, this is kind of, I live in Williamson County, so I'm not saying that. Williamson County is the only attainment county in the state of Tennessee of all 95 counties. So I think so I'm just curious as to.
There is tremendous need in Williamson County that a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah.
And so we go to where the need is. So that determines, and then we all have to have local investment. So we don't generate our revenue off of fees. If we did that, unfortunately, our families couldn't afford to come to our facilities. So it's through private investment for the most part, as Bart talked about, but also through public partnerships as well, public-private partnerships. And so the community is it's driven based on need, and then also the sustainability. Because what's worse than a Boys and Girls Club not existing in a community in this state, in my opinion, is closing one.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
Five minutes. We'll take some more time here. I'm back to the money. Let's go back to your pie charts. And I think your program is unique in where you're compensating your community navigator positions. Tell me, where do you envision these community navigators coming from? At what walk in their life are you looking to engage? And I'm leading you in this conversation because my hope is that you would engage folks who have been down a challenged road and are able to help folks who may be dealing with challenges now. Can you talk to me a little bit about the vision for this workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. So we haven't had a job fair. However, I will say that we've thought about this a lot. And to your point, most of our staff were club members growing up. And so they've lived through that experience. So we're going to, through our existing infrastructure, we're going to try to pull not from existing staff, but from similar, walks of life of individuals where we're at now, so they can truly understand, as you talked about, some of the challenges in growing up in those communities. We're not going to bring people in from the outside. They're going to be community-based people who've grown up in that community. That's our goal. It would be nice if they had a social work type background or have had some sort of experience beyond that life experience, but that's not going to be a requirement of the job by any means. And there'll be professional development, obviously, that'll go along with when they come on.
I'll tell you, Representative Hawk, what we would look for in Boys and Girls Clubs of the Tennessee Valley. My ideal community navigator will be that individual who probably at one point in time was a club parent, who's walked that tough road, who's had her kids graduate high school, they're in a career, they've got some maturity and some life experience behind them, and they can carry those young families that are just really starting that journey, they can carry them along it. That would be my ideal community navigator.
And we see that every day. I mean, this, we were talking about this story the other day when kind of, preparing for this, but a lot of times that social capital comes in the form of the child being successful through us helping through that mentorship. And then it empowers the parent to say, you know what? Well, maybe I should go get my GED, or maybe I should go to the TCAT, or, maybe I should look at where I'm at in my life, and maybe there's opportunity out there. And maybe I can leverage now my child who's gone on and been successful to help me build that social capital.
What outside, what in your service mix here didn't exist prior to this proposal?
Yeah, I think that direct service, that those direct dollars that'll flow along and help those families and support them, but then back to that community navigator, taking that really outside of our traditional mission to truly meet the whole family, kind of the two generation or even more potentially, because we have a lot of our caregivers are grandparents. And so to really look at that from a holistic side of things, because, we're trying to fix the problem 20 years from now through youth, but there's an immediate need too. And this program will allow us to address the immediate need, but the investment long-term, we may not all be in these seats any longer. And I know sometimes we think 2 and 4 and 6 years down, because that's when our elected officials are typically up for re-election. But this is long lasting, we think, because it's getting at both approaches.
One thing I would like to add to that would be new, when we talk about partners, all partners have limited capacity as well. They have constrained resources. And we're talking about engaging them on a deeper, more meaningful level. So in our organization, being able to pass through some of these dollars to the partner, for us, we're working with a mental health partner to say, hey, we can pass through some dollars so you can provide more services, more counseling, more family intervention services to families that need it, that are Boys and Girls Club families. So passing that along to improve and enhance their capacity is so important.
I believe that is correct. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I saw green and I saw postage and shipping, and I thought, I hope not.
No. So hey, you know what? Hey, listen, we take every dollar very seriously, and so when we were told we had to put everything up there, it's a little bit jumbled, but we put everything up there. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes. Yes, sir.